Hello and welcome back to the sideboard here at StarCityGames.com Open Series in Milwaukee. We're at the Standard Open. Round 5 is going on right now, and I'm with Evan Moran, who is 5-0 with this deck he's calling Prime Speaker Bug.
Yeah.
How did you come to this deck?
Honestly, I just like Bug. Like, that was really the only reason I played it. Like, I started playing in Gatecrash, and the first deck I picked up was Zagana with, like, Master Biomancer, Corpse Jack Menace, a bunch of bad stuff, but Bug was always my favorite thing to do. And then Theros comes out, and Patrick Chapin releases a Bug list, and I'm thinking, oh, this is awesome. So I made my own little changes to it over time, like these used to be Desecration Demons, other stuff, but it's evolved into pretty much what it is. Yes.
Now, of course, you're a Jeff Hoagland fan.
Yes.
And brewer with him. You have some cards here signed by him.
Yes.
And, this is something right up his alley, the Prognostic Sphinx with the Courser of Kruphix interactions, all that.
Yeah.
What the thing that's interesting here are the 4-ofs with the Reaper, and then the 3-of Kiora, and the 2 Prophet of Kruphix. Explain to me how you came to these numbers on those specific cards.
Prophet of Kruphix was I play 3 Course of Kruphix, whereas it's fine if I draw multiple copies of it. Prophet of Kruphix is just abysmal if you draw multiple copies. Like, it just does nothing. Reaper is just consistent damage right there. Like a 4/5 that scries and gives Death Touch and Hexproof. Like, I know a lot of people hate on it and say it's not very good, but I think it's awesome. Like, it's just such a good card. And 3 Kiora was an adaptation I made when the Monsters deck started to become more popular. I used to play 4 Jace Architect of Thought, actually, and Jace just wasn't pulling its weight against those big creature decks where I could just fog one of them with Kiora.
Yeah, that's interesting. You see a lot of bug lists running Jace. You don't have any Jace in the main board. You have the Kioras instead because you're opting for fogging certain targets rather than blanking big amounts of targets.
Correct. I'll fog one guy and then just use removal on another one.
You have enough spot removal to kind of stay ahead, so you don't need the +1 on the Jace Architect of Thought.
Correct.
Now, you've played a bunch of Blue Devotion decks, some Burn and some red decks, and Green-White. How good is this deck against the control decks?
It's pretty good against the control decks if the sideboard is very tuned to do that.
We'll
Kiora,
touch on that in a second.
Yeah. Kiora, Sphinx, and Reaper of the Wilds are all great against control because they have to remove Kiora or else it's going to ultimate and they're going to get Krakens in their face.
Yes.
And Reaper and Prognostic Sphinx can't be removed except by Verdict. And I still have protection against board wipes as well, so they just have no way to remove all of my threats.
On top of that, you have 3 copies of Thought Seized, take a card out of their hand, a Verdict or whatever against the control decks. And obviously the deck's called Prime Speaker Bug. You have 2 copies. I saw them just pull you out of a game where it looked like you had no chance against green-white aggro. You chained 2 of them together to just draw plenty of cards and answer everything you had.
Yeah.
How great has that card been this weekend?
It's been pretty good. Like, every time it's hit the board, I think every time that I've successfully cast it, I've won.
That's a pretty good rate.
Yeah, so win rate with her is high. She just does everything you need to do. It puts up a big blocker. It can even attack for a lot, and it just draws you cards, gets you more removal, more gas, everything you need.
Another thing, no Pelucranos World Eater in this deck. Not a fan, don't need the 4-drop.
Not really a fan, and kind of both reasons. Not really a fan, I don't need the 4-drop. He's kind of just, he's a 4-mana 5/5, but like, I'd rather have a Reaper in my hand, and I'd rather have a Prognostic Sphinx in my hand.
Right.
I always felt like when I would scry, I would always scry him to the bottom because I was like, I could be better than that.
And of course, you have chain of removal spells, Hero's Downfall, Abrupt Decay. 2 main deck Golgari Charms helps against the swarms and protects against wraths. 1 Scavenging Ooze. How good is I see a lot of people moving into 2 or 3 or 4 of that card to fight off all the burn and stuff like that. You only have 1 copy.
Yeah. Courser provided a good enough source of life gain where Scavenging Ooze was just not very good, and a lot of times I'd be wanting to spend my mana on playing spells anyway. And he really, to me, he just looks like a big 5-drop. Like, he's only really good late game. Seeing him in my hand in my opening hand is not very pleasing because I'd rather just be casting removal.
Right. Okay. Now let's look at the sideboard. You have a couple pretty interesting cards here. You had a couple copies of Gaze of Granite.
Yes.
That's another card that, when spoiled, everybody was like pretty interested in, but hasn't really found a place or it's been too slow. Where have you been using it?
I mean, it's even good against control, because there will be times when they have like 3 detention spheres, and I'll put it on 3 and then just get all my stuff back. Against aggro, I can put it on 2, just wipe their whole board. That's how I beat Mono Red. I actually won multiple games just from Gaze of Granite and then being able to swing through. It also just clears enchantments too. It doesn't even have to be creatures. It's like a green-black merciless eviction. It does everything it needs to do.
You've got one Primeval Bounty.
Yes.
I slipped on the name because you don't see it that often, but it's been like the one-ofs in a lot of Jund decks or those mid-range decks. Where have you been bringing that in against?
I've been bringing it a lot against the other mid-range decks like monsters. I actually brought it in against green-white because I knew we were going long, but it didn't matter because we draw it out anyway. So it's basically just for the other mid-range decks that want to try and 1-for-1 with me and want to try and put pressure on me, when I could just be making my guys bigger, gaining life, and being able to swing profitably, and also just putting beasts into play as chump blockers and even attackers too.
You've got 2 Jace Memory Adept, and you bring those in against sort of the flood the board decks, or the just have big dudes against big dudes board.
Yeah, a lot of times when you have like monsters versus monsters or big creatures against big creatures, you'll get into a point where nobody wants to attack. It's like, okay, draw, go. When Jace just changes all that, you're attacking them from multiple angles.
Yeah.
And while you're sitting there with all your big creatures and they have their big creatures, you're just milling them out, and they start trying to put pressure on your Jace. Then you're blocking, you're killing all their stuff in the process, and then even swinging too. So it makes it really awkward.
Seems like a card that can really change the tide of the game.
Yes, and against control, it's also just an additional threat that they have to deal with.
You've got a Whip of Erebos. Seems pretty good, bringing back all of your giant creatures.
Yeah. Truth be told, I've actually, even like for the months that I've played Bug, I've actually never whipped back a creature. It's never come up. I just use it for the life gain, and it's honestly one of the best cards in my sideboard, because just from the life gain, like being able to swing in into monsters decks and just swing past them, gain all that life, and it doesn't even matter how much they attack. I'm just gaining so much life.
Other cards that gain you life, Farika's Cure, also good against the red decks, burn deck that has been rising in popularity. Duress, also good against burn, but also good against control.
Yes.
So all of this card, and a 1 of Aetherling for control matchups.
Yeah, just as a catch-all for control matchups, because they'll be looking for the Reapers and the Sphinxes. Then I play Aetherling, and it's like, what does that card do?
Yeah. All right. Well, you're 5-0. If you had the choice, what would you get to play against the rest of this tournament?
I haven't seen it a lot, but I'd like to play against the White Weenie decks. Mostly because the main deck is so well suited to play against them, because Golgari Charm is just almost a win con against them. Farika's Cure is amazing against them. I have such a good matchup against them that'd be great to play against them.
Well, there are a couple copies floating around, so you might get lucky.
Yeah.
Well, Evan, thanks for joining me here in the sideboard. Do you have any shout-outs or anything?
Bridgeport Comics and Games in Chicago. It's my FNM. I tested with this deck with them. They didn't know everything about it.
Yep. Shout out Chicago, the Blackhawks jersey.
They're playing tomorrow. Go Hawks.
Maybe you'll be able to check them out after a nice score here tonight.
Oh, yeah.
All right, well, thanks, Evan, for joining me on the sideboard. Stay tuned for all of the Milwaukee coverage here at StarCityGames.com.